Today, we're talking about vendors, building relationships with property managers, and we're joined by Jaclyn. Welcome back.
Thanks. I'm glad to be back, especially for
Well,
this topic.
it is an important one, and we do get asked all the time because we work with a bunch of vendors that are serving
Hmm.
strata communities and delivering mutual wins to owners who are looking for better service or better price. So it is something that's near and dear to our hearts, and I'm delighted that you're willing to share your expertise. So, Jaclyn, you do a bunch of work in and around this industry. You're a
Hmm.
writer and you were a strata manager. I say retired. I mean, it's more like on hiatus. Where are you?
Hiatus is a good one. I'm in El Salvador right now, so just tucked in a river in the middle of nowhere, El Salvador. Really,
Fantastic. Proving that you really can work from anywhere.
you really can.
So, tell us what goes on inside of a strata.
Oh, this is perfect. This is one of my favorite topics because um, vendors can be your best friend or your worst nightmare. And I think the first step to understanding the relationship is really understanding or getting inside of what the strata manager does. It's not just sitting behind a desk, uh, collecting strata fees and paying bills. It's so much more than that. It's answering any type of question, comment, or concern that the strata council or any of the owners have. They're overseeing budgets and contracts and all the maintenance, insurance claims, which we hope there's not many of, emergencies, which we hope there's even fewer of. And that's spread across anywhere from 8 to 15, and in some instances, more than that per manager. So vendors need to understand that managers are really busy. They're not ignoring them per se. There's sometimes that they might be, but they have to understand that these managers are really busy. There's really high expectations put on them by the owners because it's a lot of money. Strata fees are a lot of money every month. People don't want to pay them, so they want to make sure that their money is going to the best possible thing. So there's a really high expectation on the manager to make sure they're spending the money in the best way possible. They're making sure they're getting the work done quickly and it's being done right. Um, and
It's
another
intense pressure.
it's a lot of pressure, and I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to open LinkedIn or even like the news and not see that there's manager burnout and how difficult of a job it is. And it can be a really difficult job, but it's also, a really rewarding job, and lots of people do it. uh, Another thing vendors really do need to understand is the manager doesn't make the decision. The manager's there to collect the information, review it to the strata council. Now, the manager does have a lot of sway over the strata council, but they're not the ones saying, hey, we're going to hire Bob to clean the windows. It's just not how it works.
Right. And how many vendors does a typical property manager have to juggle for a strata?
Ooh, there's probably dozens because you've got a vendor for everything. Your main things are your janitorial, your mechanical maintenance, elevators if you have one, landscaping. So there's four off, recurring ones, and then you've got handymen doing repairs, window cleaning, gutter cleaning, fire inspections, roof maintenance. So you're looking at dozens of jobs, and then in some instances you're looking at 3 quotes for each of those contracts, maybe not every year, but intermittently. So you're juggling a lot. There's a lot of contractors on the go. There's a lot of people competing for the manager's
And you
time
get to
and the
multiply
council's
that
money.
by 8 to 15.
Sure do. Now, if you have a really good relationship with the vendor, that vendor's probably working on a lot of your properties.
Which
So
is good.
like a smart manager, which I'm not going to say that I was, but I'm not going to say I wasn't. They will try and get the same vendor across the properties. It just makes life easier, and the more you can make your life easier, the better.
We will neither confirm nor deny whether you are a
We
smart
will not.
manager.
We will not confirm or deny that one.
So the managers are under high pressure. They get $35 per door as a monthly fee. That's to their firm. It covers their accounting. It covers the contract management. It covers their time and their services and everything else. And as a result, owners have high demands and high expectations on them. They're juggling all of this. How does a vendor approach them?
That's a good one. It's tricky because a cold email or, God forbid, a phone call is not going to work unless you just happen to need window washing and a window washing contractor appears in your inbox and you don't know any other window washing contractors. So it's not really going to happen. The best way to get in front of the manager is to get a referral from another manager or a referral from another trade. So if you're a janitorial company and you had a good friend who was in the fire industry and could make that connection, then it's really good to do it that way. But when you're actually engaging with the manager, just have some empathy for their time and keep the communication clear and concise. Email is preferable.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And obviously, the strata manager is your point of contact. They are also the gatekeeper.
They are. And I think saying gatekeeper might have a negative connotation, but for the strata council, it's really good because they're volunteers and they're relying on the manager to collect all of the information, put it into some kind of way that they can review it and just make a decision. So that manager is filtering all the proposals. There's going to be terrible proposals. There's going to be junk that comes across the desk. And they're only bringing the good value information to the strata council with some recommendations, whether it's personal experience, whether it's experience from coworkers, to the council, so the council can say, yeah, we want to hire Bob.
And Jaclyn, is it always about price, or as a manager, were you making sure to give them some optionality over the level of service that they might receive?
It depends on the building. For me, as a manager, selfishly, it's never about price. And now I realize that comes across not great, but there's a reason. And I would always tell the strata councils, and I'm going to use roofing as an example. I generally worked with the same roofing contractor across the entire portfolio that I managed, and they were not the cheapest, and they weren't the most expensive, but they were up there. And I would always say the same thing. Here's your 3 quotes for, your annual roof maintenance. This is the one that I recommend, not because, they're not the cheapest, they're not the most expensive, but I can always safely say they're going to do a good job. They're thorough. They will happily sit down with the council and work through any issues, explain it. They'll even take you up onto that roof and show you what they're talking about, depending on what kind of roof it is. Like we're not going on sloped roofs here, those nice flat ones. And so no, it's not always about the cheapest, but there are some strata councils that are very, very budget minded, and it's not a bad thing. Some of the smaller ones just can't afford the most expensive. So then you're balanced looking for maybe not the cheapest, but you're looking for something that's inexpensive who's still going to do good work. And that can be difficult. So it's not always about the money. Usually it's not about the money.
Really, price is what you pay and value is what you get. You don't necessarily get good value by going for the cheapest price.
No, you don't. And especially with the big ticket items, you can get by on like a cheap carpet cleaning, but you can't get by on a cheap window repair.
Yes, I would say that my cheap carpet cleaning didn't work out that well either.
Oh no.
It just didn't seem to stay as clean after I got it cleaned.
They really don't. Yeah.
So effective communication. You're going to these strata managers who are filtering through the opportunities. You want to make sure that your communication is concise and relevant.
Yeah.
How do you stand out?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think you can stand out in a couple ways. You can stand out in a bad way and you can stand out in a good way. standing out in a good way is asking thoughtful questions and understanding that there's a process. So a really great one, and a lot of really successful vendors will give you the proposal, and the proposals are going to be clear and concise. Don't give the manager a 20-page document about carpet cleaning. Just, you don't need it. We need to know that you have WCB and insurance, that you're covered on that. A couple of referrals if they've never worked with you. That's great. They're probably not. The manager realistically is not going to call referrals, but if you've got other managers, especially ones in the same brokerage, then it's a little easier. But if you've got a couple of referrals, you've got the proposal. I mean, if you really feel the need, you can tuck the company information in the background, but if they've found you or you found them, they already know what the company is. So a nice, concise, short, to the point package emailed over, and understand that this has got to go to a council vote, probably a council meeting. So there's no harm in saying, when do you expect that the council will have made a decision or is planning to make a decision? Because this might be for the next budget year. So you don't really want to be giving a proposal and then following up the next day and the day after that and the day after that. That's your surefire way to become memorable in a bad way. So following up, but not being pushy about it, and understanding that the council has to work through their process, and they may come back with questions. So it's not always you put the proposal in on Monday and by Friday you
Absolutely.
have the job. There's very few instances where that happens.
Great. Now, you've said avoid bypassing them as well as not being overly aggressive. What's bypassing them?
Yeah. Never, ever, ever, ever bypass the strata manager. Don't give the strata manager the quote and then, or don't not give the manager the quote. The quote has to go to the strata manager, and then you wait for the strata manager to get back to you. If you've snuck around the strata manager and gone directly to the council or directly to the strata manager's boss, that strata manager is going to find out, and the response that you get from the manager is not going to be the one you want. It's not going to be a, hey, we're going to go with your quote. It's probably going to be a message that starts with an F and then ends with an F, and you're never going to hear from that manager or any of their buildings again. It's the worst possible thing to do. You might think you're helping them, but you're not helping them. And you don't want to go to their boss either, because as a person who was overseeing some managers, if the vendor, I have gotten calls from vendors saying, well, I gave this quote to Bob. I'm always going to use Bob because I've never worked with a Bob. I gave this quote to Bob and he didn't respond back to me. And I'm going to say, well, that's Bob's issue. That's not a me issue. And you want to follow up with Bob. And that's as far as it goes. I'm not going to go chase a manager and say, you didn't get back to company X, Y, and Z, because once they do, they're going to get back and say, thanks, we're not going to go with your quote. It's just not going to
That's an interesting one. What about strata managers themselves? I hear there are special rules about them trying to solicit for business.
Like a strata manager soliciting for business? Or that's a tricky one. If I was a vendor, and I feel like I know where you're going with this. So if I was a vendor and I had a strata manager saying, why don't we talk about it over this fancy lunch at Miku? Then I would probably say, no, thank you. I'm not interested. Managers typically don't solicit for work other than, here's the quotes, or here's what I'm looking for. I need landscaping for 12 months for this building. It's located at this, and I need the price by next Friday. That's the soliciting that you want. If you're getting a manager that's looking for more than a quote,
and if we were to turn that around completely and say that instead of being a vendor approaching a strata manager, the vendor is the strata management company looking to grow their business.
Ooh, there's a lot of rules around that, and it's a tricky one because you can't, as strata management companies, and when I worked for a strata management company and we did we're growing the business, and they were very successful in growing the business. As far as soliciting went, it was just advertising. There was never direct, or there should never be direct to a strata council saying, "Hey, Thomas, I don't know you, but would you like a new management company? We can offer X, Y, and Z." That doesn't really happen. A lot of times, management companies, it's by word of mouth, or councils will reach out. They'll maybe see some advertising online, just saying, we're management company A, B, and C, and we offer this handy thing.
I'd heard that there were some unusual rules that applied to strata management firms, and that intrigued me because it sounded kind of anti-competitive. You can't go and approach a strata for business. Why not?
That's a great question.
We'll park that one there and flip back
but you can't,
to effective proposal outreach. So what are these tips?
Oh, these are good ones. And the first one is timing. You want to make sure that if you're gonna send an email to the manager, and you're sending a proposal, if they're not expecting it, if you're just sending a company intro or a follow-up email, which we'll get to, you don't want to send it on a Monday, because a manager's coming in on Monday. There's a weekend's worth of emails from who knows who and what. And then they're also trying to now get ready for the week coming up. And then on Fridays, that manager's trying to leave the office. Like, they do not want to start a new project. They just want to tie up whatever they can for the week and get out of there. So the best time to send an email, especially if it's not something that the manager's expecting or looking for, is midweek. There's a little lull. There's a little lull there. Not a big one, just enough that they can say, "Oh, hey, there's a email that I haven't read from Bob that I don't really know. Maybe I'll check it out." But if it's on a Monday, it's probably going to get missed. It's going to get buried. And then if it's on a Friday, they're going to go, "I don't know what this is."
Skipped and forgotten, buried in the inbox.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But a good way to, and this is follow-up strategies, it's always really nice if you've met somebody at a PAMA event or a BOMA event or through a mutual connection, is just to kind of stay fresh in their mind, and send a follow-up email. Just say, "Hey, I met you last week at, I don't know, BOMA's bowling event. It was nice to meet you. Here's some information that we talked about." Don't meet somebody, say, "Hi, my name's Jaclyn. I'm a vendor with this fire company," and then just pepper them with email. Like, try and make it a little bit more natural, and then just kind of staying in their mind, not spammy every week, but just intermittently, pop up and say hello, especially if you made a good connection with the person, which is respectful communications, is ongoing contact without being pushy, and understanding. It all comes back to timelines. These strata moves, for as busy of a job that it moves incredibly slow. The managers are doing a ton of work, but the buildings themselves do not make decisions quickly. A simple window washing could span 2 or 3 council meetings, which means that $4,000 quote for window washing could take 4 months to get approved. So these things are painfully slow. So you need to understand that if you haven't gotten asked for a quote yet, just staying like, "Hey, how's it going? Is there anything you need help with?" For some, those emails might be annoying, but for me, they weren't, because every once in a while you do come up to "Oh, I needed a chimney sweep, and I met that chimney sweeper like a couple months ago. Oh, they're there in my inbox." Like, sometimes it's just about timing.
Small projects can take 3 council meetings. What happens when there's like a major envelope project?
Oh, they can take a long time. I managed a building that had a 10-year, they had a significant issue with their envelope, and I think they had been working on it for years. Like, I'm going to say upwards of 10 years, and it may or may not be resolved yet. Now, there's other factors at play, but you have to, if it's a big project, there's going to be an engineer involved. There's the company that is going to do the work. There's going to be an AGM. So you're already at a year, or depending on where the quotes come in. But these decisions, and then there's a lot of money, so there's a good chance you're going to get to the AGM and the owners are going to say, well, we need more information, and then you're going to have to go back. And big projects
Big
take
time.
big
And
time.
there'd be an SGM if they didn't get the approval of the AGM for that type of project, right?
Yeah, hopefully, yes. Hopefully they don't just let it
Amazing.
go
So
by the
how do they
wayside.
stand out?
Don't go and just bring donuts to the office. It's not gonna work. But donuts are appreciated. I'm not gonna knock anybody who brings donuts to the office or snacks. But you just want to be an authentic person, because yes, the Strata Council is hiring the company, but you're going through the manager. So you do need to be a likable person, and Strata managers are pretty smart people. They can tell when you're not authentic, if you're just too nice or you're just trying to win the business by being flashy. Big fancy lunches aren't going to win the business. If somebody's always going to those big flashy lunches, it's probably not going to be a long-term relationship, because the next vendor is going to come along with a flashier lunch or something better, and that manager is going to go with them. So you're looking to build long relationships. So be yourself. Don't be scared of using a little humor. I had a vendor who became a friend, and a very successful vendor, who targeted a really small group of people with their New Kids on the Block advertising. So we're all like, we're aging ourselves with that too. So that was a very specific age group that he targeted, and it worked, and it was funny. And then, he sent the advertising, I think, in an email after we had met through a mutual vendor friend, and then said, oh, do you have time to have coffee and talk about my janitorial services? And I was like, oh, it was a really funny advertising. It was something different. It stuck out in the very corporate world of Strata management. So we did, and it opened the door for what became a really long janitorial relationship and spanned across a lot of buildings. So you just finding that thing, using a little humor, being a little bit, don't be scared to be a little different. And I see a lot of companies doing it now on LinkedIn, having funnier, using a lot of more humor. And I think it targets the younger managers, the managers that are like kind of coming up behind the older managers. So I think that works really well, but also being there when you call or when you need something, that's good. Once you've gotten in the door, or just being the person, if the manager says, I'm in a pinch, I really need somebody to clean carpets this weekend because there was a horrible mess, and just being like, yes, I can get somebody there this afternoon. I worked with a contractor who never said no. They always were able to fix a problem. It didn't matter what it was. If you needed a Christmas tree on like December 23rd and you called and be like, I need a Christmas tree, and be like, it'll be there this afternoon. I don't know how it happened, but it did. So being reliable and answering your phone when someone calls, or answering an email, and just being responsive is key. If I emailed a vendor and they didn't get back to me, I just
humor and a good offer can get you in the door, but you get to stick around if you prove that you'll live up to the task.
Exactly. And then there's a lot of vendors out there that share really useful educational stuff, whether that's doing like a lunch and learn, or like a learning opportunity, taking a manager, offering to walk the manager through a mechanical system. Or I had a roofing vendor that took me through a roof walkthrough, and even though I'm terribly afraid of heights, I crawled up onto the roof and even went to the tippy-toppy roof, and they could point out, this is what we look for when we do these roofing inspections. And that stuff like that's really valuable and leaves a lasting impression in the manager's mind, because now they look really good to the council. So if they look good, they're more apt to hire the person that made them look good.
That makes a lot of sense too. I've been kind of jealous. I've seen some of these demos and lunch and learns with some of these interesting plumbing and mechanical systems, and that looks great.
Oh yeah. They're way better than when I was a manager. Like when I was a manager, you sat in front of a PowerPoint presentation, and now they take you and like actually show you things.
And that kind of hands-on learning sticks with you. You had a few examples, good and bad, from your direct experience.
Mm-hmm. I had a vendor that thought he was saving, well, they claimed that they thought it was saving me time to just go straight to the council with the quotes, which they did. And that was the last quote he ever gave to the council. And it was not helpful. It makes the manager look bad because the council is going, oh, did you get this quote from
Right.
Jeff? And you're like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, he sent it right to my inbox. And then you have to run around and go to the contractor and be like, hey, can I see that quote that you sent? Oh, perfect. It was not what we were looking for at all. And then the manager, you've put a bad taste in the manager's mouth. So what else are you gonna? The manager's gonna always wonder, what else are you gonna circumnavigate or circumvent me for? So it's just not good. Just go through the manager. Yeah. Good introductions. I did reference that. One of my favorite janitorial vendors had a mutual introduction with a friend that she was like a business mentor for him. And she went around one summer I think she drug him around to all the golf tournaments and whatever else she did that she could bring a +1. And she introduced him to everyone and said, oh, this is my friend. He runs a janitorial company. You should get to know him. And so then it just kind of put when he did email later, there was a name there. I'm like, oh, this is so-and-so that Patty introduced me to. And so it puts a face to the name. It's not just some random person sending you an email saying, hey, do you want to talk about janitorial? No, because I don't have time. But if it's somebody you've met before and you had a good relationship with the person that made the intro, it works. And especially if vendor to vendor is like vendor to the manager is good. But if you work with a manager and you're like, hey, I'm trying to meet Jaclyn, do you mind making an introduction? That also works really well too, because if you've got a colleague that's already using that vendor and they're really happy, then there's a good chance that it's a good vendor.
So getting through the door, you can leverage some of those relationships.
Yeah. And the no-show, this one was, I had a vendor that was supposed to come to a council meeting, and the council meeting was on a Tuesday, and I think he put in his calendar Thursday. And so I'm standing outside the building waiting, and usually vendors show up like right on time, or they're there a couple minutes earlier, or they'll text you and say like, I'm running late. And nothing. And it's running like right up to the meeting. And I was like, okay, well, what's going on? So I thankfully had the vendor's cell phone number. I called and said, hey, meeting's starting in 2 minutes. Where are you? And he goes, oh no. And he's like, I literally put the wrong date in. I'm so sorry. And I had a relationship with the vendor before, and I knew this was a very budget-oriented council, and this vendor was very inexpensive, and they were already leaning towards the vendor anyway. So he owned up to the mistake. He was like, I'm so sorry. I can come out. There's no way I can make it there tonight, but I can come out and meet the council any other time. And, I just explained it to the council. Look, I didn't say he forgot. I just said, something's come up. There's been an emergency. He's not going to be able to make it. Do you want to reschedule? And they understood. Like, everybody makes mistakes, but if you try to cover up that mistake or don't answer your phone or just don't show up, you gotta own up to it. Everybody makes mistakes, and that vendor ended up getting the job, and
it all comes back to the same things, right? Like respecting everyone's time and being authentic about it.
Yeah.
Excellent examples.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the stratas themselves, how do they kind of prove that they deserve to stick around as a vendor?
Being reliable. So if you've got a contract and you say, we're going to start window washing on Monday, then you start on Monday. If you can't start on Monday, because sometimes these very tall towers, if it's windy in Vancouver, which we know, that happens occasionally, they can't really do the work if it's really windy. So it's communicating. So if you can't deliver what you said you were going to deliver, and be really upfront about it. Just say, this is, it's too windy, we can't start window washing. Or if it's like an elevator repair and the part didn't come in, just tell the manager as soon as you know that there's potentially an issue, so they can relay it to the council. Everyone understands delays, or somebody's sick or things happen. And you just need to communicate it right away, because if you don't communicate it, all of a sudden the manager's getting questions, the council's mad, they're taking it out on the manager is going to take it out on you. It may be the last time you work for that building. So you just have to really be honest and open. And if you say you're going to do something,
Follow through.
do the
That
thing.
makes a lot of sense. You're mentioning cost transparency next. I've got questions on that, but please tell us about it.
The price is the price. Don't try to get in the door with the price that looks like it's the cheapest, but then there's all these add-ons down the road. So the council is going to go, oh, we paid this amount for a fire, so I'm going to use fire inspection. We paid this amount for fire inspection, but how come the bill is 3 times the amount? And then you go back to the vendor and they're like, oh, well, the fire inspection was that price, but then we also had to inspect the sprinklers, and that was an extra price. And then the hoses were an extra price. And just either detail it very clearly so there's no misunderstanding, or if I'm asking for a fire inspection and that's for everything, just, you can break it down, but then give me the price for everything instead of trying to hide it down in a 20-page document. So being really clear about it, or not starting the job and then going, oh, this is more work than I thought it was going to be, we're going to need to bump that price up or we won't be able to finish.
Yeah, I'm
That
sure
has
it
also
has.
happened.
I mean, that's really awkward for the manager or for a
Yeah.
strata council. They've got a budget they're working towards. They put in the proposal amount that they've selected into their budget. If they find that there are a bunch of hidden charges and extras, they blow their budget and they've got to make that up. And
Exactly.
you've mentioned fire. That sounds like one that you've been stung by before. What other vendors or business lines do you see a lot of hidden extras?
Fire inspections, and I don't even know if it's hidden. It's never that clear. Like they just can't seem to be like, this is how much the entire fire inspection is going to have with all of these extra add-ons. Landscaping is another one. My favorite landscapers are terrible about it. You have the price and the price looks really great, but then you look and you're like, oh, but if I want summer annuals and winter annuals and it's all these extra prices, and you get used to it, but it does get tiresome to constantly have to explain it. And I explain it to the council, like, yes, this looks like the price, but you have to add in all these other things down here. And I understand why some companies do it, but it's difficult. And if you're not used to looking at those types of contracts, it can be really misleading for a new manager or a manager who's not worked with that vendor before to say, oh, this is the price, and then come to find out that's not the price. The price was actually that plus this and the other thing, right, and the other thing over there. So if you can't just give one price, make sure it's really clear what the price is.
And finally, for a vendor that doesn't have a solid understanding of a strata manager's process, how do they create that alignment?
I think talking to the manager, if you've gotten that far down the road that you're submitting quotes, I think it's okay to ask, when do you think they're going to make a decision? And if this is a big project, like if you're doing a roof replacement, I think right up front is the point to ask, is like, is this on the table for the AGM? When's the AGM coming? Or is it an SGM? Or do they already have the funds approved for it? Because if this is a manager who's getting ready for an AGM and that AGM is 2 or 3 months down the road or further out, then you kind of need to tailor your estimates, especially for things where the costs of goods vary, is to understand that, because it's happened to me before with like a really specific roof repair with cedar shingles, and the price of wood just goes up and down all over the place, and the council had approved it, but by the time we got the quote, the owners to approve it, the price of cedar shingles had skyrocketed, so they couldn't actually afford the project anymore. And that, I think, is a rare instance because that's a really niche repair. But had the vendor been up front and said, just so you know, wood prices fluctuate quite wildly. You might want to, when you're budgeting for it, add some money in there in case the price fluctuates. But nobody thought to ask, hey, when are we actually going to do this work? Is this a quote in on Monday, approval on Friday situation? And that was a case of a vendor that's never worked with a Strata before, and a Strata manager who didn't understand that wood prices wildly fluctuated.
What was the solution in that case? Did they wait until there was a lower price, or did they come up with an alternate product?
No, they could not. It was a heritage building in Vancouver, which it's not ideal because they had to go with, they had to use cedar shingles, and it was a really small strata. So everyone was very lucky. The owners had already approved. They also they loved this heritage building in the part of the strata. So the council, we went back to the owners and said, look, this is the price. There's a price difference now. And they just called an SGM. They had the money in the CRF to take it out. So it cost more money. We were really lucky on that one, but that was a learning experience for everyone.
So this is a bit of a recap. You've covered transparent communication. Yeah. Don't waste a manager's time. You've got a deadline. You've said when you're going to do something. Do it or explain in advance with good communication. What's about this flexibility and responsiveness?
Oh, vendors, I think a lot of vendors will understand this. The councils are volunteers, so they're not going to be experts in janitorial or mechanical. They might have an interest in it and might know some about it, but there's going to be questions. So you have to be prepared to answer questions that you probably answered 55 times already about the quote to the council, and giving updates all the time. If you're doing a big project, there's nothing wrong with a weekly update, especially if it's for like a big, like an envelope project or a painting project, just so that you can send it to the manager can forward it on, or at this stage in the game, there may be a council member who's very invested in that project or that landscaping thing or mechanical. And at that point, it's okay to, with the manager's blessing, to reach out directly to the council. And that's my next point. So once you've been awarded that contract or that job, oftentimes there is a council member who's got a really good interest in it, or now's the time to build the relationship a little bit beyond the manager, not going around the manager, but building the relationship with council, asking for feedback, saying, it's been 6 months. How's the janitorial contract going? Could you take the council on a walkthrough to get their opinions on things? Or, is there an interest in having the contractor there for 5 minutes at a council meeting to get any feedback and concerns? There's 2 reasons for this. And the first is, it's great to get in front of any problems. It's great to build long-term relationship. But the number 2 is strata managers, as we all know, change portfolios quite often. So they're bigger and better buildings, different roles. They might change companies. They might just sail around the world. Who knows? But if you have that relationship with the strata council, when the next manager comes in and says, oh, we're going to change Bob's janitorial to Fred's janitorial, the council can say, no, thank you. We're really happy with Bob. He's very responsive. He takes the time to walk through with us. He understands what our building is like. And so you've built that relationship with the council, so it extends past the changing of the manager.
Little stickiness, that's good.
Yeah, and I also like it. I had a building, and they had a very keen interest in mechanical and landscaping and the janitorial, and it was like 3 different council members. So they each kind of took it on as their own, which made my job as a manager really easy. So if there was an issue with the landscaping, Janice was there. Janice was like, I'll take the landscapers. I'm going to show them exactly what's wrong. And then the landscaper would just send the quote to me and be like, and they keep me in the loop the whole time. They'd be like, I'm meeting with Janice next week. Did you want to come? And I'd be like, no, that's okay. I don't need to see the cherry tree that needs to be replaced. but it made my job really easy. So when there was an issue, Janice was okay to reach out to the landscaper, or the landscaper was okay to reach out to Janice, all while keeping me in the loop. So I never felt like anyone was going around me, but also I just didn't have to do it. And when I left the building, all those trades just stayed on because the council was really happy with them.
Excellent. Well, that's a really great takeaway for anyone that's listening. We'll finish on this slide here with some quick wins, and then we've got some Q&A.
Time. The managers are really busy. They don't have time for chit-chatty phone calls or just dropping by the office unannounced. They're probably not in the office anyway, but respect their time. Short, to the point emails, which flows into the next clear and concise communication. Educating them over selling them. So if you're poised as the expert in the issue, they're going to come to you anyway. If you're just saying like, hey, buy my things, there's no value in them for that. And building trust, which is the same as being reliable, being honest, and doing what you say you're going to do.
And you can take that extra step by getting that feedback and reinforcing that relationship.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Jaclyn, that's been great. We have a few questions. One, what's the best way to get on a Strata's preferred vendor list?
Oh, no. That's a tough one. It's probably not the Strata manager that's making the list, but if the Strata manager is really happy with the work that's being done, you could always, gently say, who is in charge of the mythical list? A lot of companies don't have one. Everyone just thinks they do, but there are some that do have them. And the biggest thing is making sure you have WCB, or WorkSafe, I should say. You have the proper insurances, and you've got some credible references, and trying to meet the person who makes the list. And that almost comes back to the same as trying to meet a manager. So you try and get an intro from somebody who's on the list, or from a really well-respected manager in that company. Can say, hey, I use Bob for janitorial. I really think we should consider him for our list. Those are the ways.
Right. We've had someone that says they're being stonewalled by a manager, and they believe that there is some list they can't get on because the manager is not in charge of it. The order's coming from above. We've heard you loud and clear about not going direct to a Strata, but what do you do in that situation?
Oh, that's a really tough situation because there's always going to be not always, but there can be an issue there that might have happened in the past where the contractor has upset the person who's making the list. I think if I was the vendor, I would probably address it with the manager and say, well, do you know what the issue is? And is there someone I can speak to? You're not just saying, well, I'm just going to go above you, but what is the issue? Is it because my insurance lapsed once, or I did a bad job once? I'd like to address it. And, asking, am I able to speak with the person that makes the list? No, there's no guarantee, but if you can find out the person or the source of what's causing the stonewall, might be a good idea. That's a tough one.
I have a tricky and then a fun question for you. The tricky one.
Okay.
One manager told me to think outside the box, direct quote from a vendor, when they made a proposal that included a discount. What is the manager telling them?
That is a tricky question because I almost, what more than a discount could a vendor offer? Are you offering discounts in the first place? But I think if I was that vendor, I would be a little nervous when somebody's saying think outside the box, because like my mind immediately goes to, are we talking like an envelope full of cash or like a vacation kind of thing? Because if so, like just run, just do not, it's not worth it. It's not worth the business. And if they blatantly come out and say that, then like there's a licensing body for Strata managers that very clearly says you can't do that. So but I think that's a red flag for me if I was a vendor.
Could be. Maybe it was just an indication that they should be finding a creative way to reach the individual managers or something. I don't know. And in
Maybe.
terms of a discount, I think it was a relatively new business, a new startup venture, and they were trying to win a portfolio. And if they could get
Oh.
X many jobs at once, then they do it at a discount to get the business
Oh, well then
going.
that's
So
fair. Okay. If it's multiple jobs, then I think that's like a bulk discount is easy. But then yeah, then that does make the think outside the box a little trickier. Because maybe it's a think outside the box, like what else could you offer to our clients? Like maybe there's an educational thing that would provide some extra value. Maybe it's just me being cynical thinking that manager or brokerage is looking for something like an envelope full of cash, and they're not really, they're just looking for like an educational thing. So maybe I would try like the more innocent, well, how about some like educational stuff for your councils, or like
great
maybe a
idea.
lunch and learn for your staff, instead of immediately thinking, the wrong
Why
thing.
we are cynical in that way, I don't know, Jaclyn.
I don't know.
On to the
Years.
fun and finishing question. What
Perfect.
does it cost to cross the Panama Canal?
Oh, oh God. So it's a lot of money for a sailboat that is about 44 feet, which mine's not 44 feet. It's a little smaller. It is $3,700. But if there's only two of you on the sailboat, you need to have a captain, which we have one captain, it's not me. And there's only one line handler. I'm the line handler. The dog does not count. And then, so we have to, it would be more than $3,700 for us because we have to hire 3 Panamanian line handlers. So we're talking 4,000 plus. It's a lot of
Wow.
money. But the alternate the alternate option for getting to the Atlantic, other than, there's 2 ways. You could sail all the way around the world to the Atlantic, or you could go down around Cape Horn, which is very dangerous, and we'd probably cause more than $4,000 of damage to the boat doing it. So there you go. That's a fun
Interesting.
question.
Well, that is a fun question. One
Yes,
of the surprises of life at sea.
it is.
Thank you so much, Jaclyn, for
No problem.
joining us today. Next week, we'll be joined by Paul Murcutt of BFL Insurance to talk about proactive risk management and practical
Ooh.
tips to help with insurance costs. So we will return, and Jaclyn, we'll have you back when you've relocated to your next destination. Thank you
Oh,
so
that sounds
much.
great. Thanks, Thomas.